Welcome back to Revenge Fire. The story you're about to hear takes place in Cloverfield, Indiana. My name is Dana Mercer. I'm 29 years old, and according to my family, I'm the one they don't talk about at dinner parties. I'm a licensed electrician. I wear a tool belt to work. My hands are rough and my boots are steel-toed, and my uniform has my name stitched above the left pocket in orange thread. I've been doing this since I was 22, when I walked straight out of a 2-year trade program and into an apprenticeship at an electrical contracting company on the east side of town. I work long days. I come home with grease under my fingernails and the smell of copper wire on my clothes. Some nights I'm too tired to do anything except sit on my couch and eat cereal straight from the box. But every bill I've ever had got paid. Every single one. On time. My family has never once said they were proud of me for that. You ever spend years holding something together that nobody even admits is falling apart, only to find out they've been embarrassed by you the whole time? My father passed away when I was 19. Heart attack, sudden, no warning. One morning he was there, and by that afternoon he wasn't. My mother had never worked a full-time job in her adult life. My older brother was halfway through his MBA. My younger sister had just started college on a partial scholarship that didn't cover everything. And my little brother, the youngest, was 15, and still needed 4 more years of someone keeping the lights on and the refrigerator stocked. So I dropped my plan to move to Chicago. I enrolled in the trade program instead of the 4-year university I'd been accepted to. I took the fastest path to a real paycheck I could find, because that's what the moment required. Nobody asked me to. I just looked at the math and made a decision. I helped cover the mortgage for almost 3 years. I bought my little brother's school clothes and paid for his junior prom ticket. I stayed in Cloverfield. I didn't complain about it because complaining doesn't keep the heat running in January. My mother, to this day, has never once said thank you. What she has said, more times than I can count, is some version of the same thing. Said it at my cousin's wedding when relatives asked about her children, and she smiled wide and listed them out. My oldest is in finance now, you know. My middle daughter just got her master's. My youngest is pre-med, can you believe it? And then someone would ask, "And what about Dana?" And she would get this small, tight look on her face, the kind that means she's about to manage a situation rather than answer a question. Dana works in the trades. She does electrical work. Said in the same tone someone might use to say Dana is going through a phase. She couldn't say it like it was real. Like I was real. I told myself I didn't care. I told myself she just came from a different generation, a different idea of what success looked like. I told myself that when she needed something fixed in the house, she always called me first. That had to mean something. I was wrong about that. I was wrong about a lot of things. Before I tell you about the specific moment everything changed, and what I did after that my family is still not over, I want to ask you something first. What time is it where you are right now? And where are you watching from? I want to know how far this is traveling. My brother's graduation party was my mother's event of the decade. He finished his MBA from a university 3 states away, and my mother acted like he had personally cured a disease. For 6 weeks, leading up to the party, she talked about nothing else. She rented a hall. She ordered catered food. She made a slideshow. She had matching family photos taken in advance. The kind where everyone wears coordinating colors and stands in front of a brick wall looking like a catalog. I showed up for the photo session. I wore the cream-colored blouse she texted me to wear. I stood where the photographer pointed me. I smiled. 2 weeks before the party, I called my mother to ask what time she wanted me to arrive to help set up. She was quiet for a second too long. Then she said, "Oh, honey, I think we have enough help. You don't need to come early." I said, "I don't mind. I can move tables, hang things, whatever you need." She said, "Actually, and this is the word that should have told me everything. Actually, I've been meaning to talk to you. I think for the seating, I'm going to put you and your friend at a table near the back. I want the front tables to be for family and colleagues. People your brother is trying to impress. You understand." I stood in my kitchen and let that sentence move through me slowly. People your brother is trying to impress. I asked her, very quietly, to clarify what she meant by that. She said, "Well, his professors are coming, people from his firm. It's a professional event, Dana, not just a family dinner. I need the room to reflect well on him. You know how these things go. I knew exactly how it went. She didn't want her MBA son's colleagues asking too many questions about the daughter who wires houses for a living. I said okay. I hung up the phone. I stood in the middle of my kitchen for a long time without moving. The party was on a Saturday. I drove there alone, got there on time, and found the table near the back my mother had described. It was next to the door that led to the catering kitchen. Every time a server walked through that door, it swung wide, and the noise of clanging dishes came with it. My cousin, who works as a dental hygienist and apparently also didn't make the front table cut, was already sitting there when I arrived. She looked at me and said, "I see she did the same thing to you." I looked at the front of the room. My mother was at the center table with my brother, glowing, touching his arm every few minutes, introducing him to people like she was presenting something she'd built herself. My sister with her master's degree was at that table. My little brother, who was 3 semesters into pre-med and hadn't yet done anything except exist with potential, was at that table. There was no chair with my name at any of them. The slideshow started halfway through dinner. My mother had put it together herself, and it ran on a loop on a screen above the head table. Photos of my brother through the years, his high school graduation, his college acceptance letter, his first day of grad school, and woven between those photos, shots of the family. My mother and all 4 of us kids. My brother at the center of almost every one. I was in exactly 2 photos in the whole slideshow. Both were from before my father died, when I was still a teenager. After that, I had apparently stopped being worth photographing at milestone moments. At some point during the dinner, one of my brother's professors came over to the back table, the wrong table, clearly lost, looking for the restroom. My cousin pointed him in the right direction. He glanced at me and asked, friendly enough, "Are you with the family?" Before I could answer, my mother appeared from nowhere, materialized the way she always does when there's a perception to manage, put her hand on the man's arm and said, smoothly, "This is Dana, my daughter. She's very proud of her brother." She said nothing about what I did. She said nothing about who I was, just that I was proud of someone else. I smiled. I watched her steer the professor back toward the important table, and I felt something inside me go very, very quiet. That night, after the party, I sat in my car in the parking lot for a long time before starting the engine. I didn't cry. I wasn't even angry yet. I was just sitting with the specific shape of what had happened, turning it over in my mind. She had rented a hall and catered food and made a slideshow and invited professors and colleagues, and she had put me next to a kitchen door. I drove home and didn't sleep. 3 days after the party, my mother sent a message to our family group chat. It was a photo someone had taken of her with my brother at the front table, both of them laughing, his diploma frame propped up against a flower centerpiece. She wrote, "So proud of the life I've raised. This family is going places." My sister sent hearts. My little brother sent a fire emoji. My brother wrote, "Couldn't have done it without you, Mom." I stared at the screen for a full minute. Then I typed the message I had never in my life allowed myself to type. Not in 10 years of watching this happen, not once. I wrote, "Quick question. Who paid the mortgage for 3 years after Dad died so the rest of you could keep going to school?" I hit send before I could stop myself. The read receipts appeared almost immediately. First my brother, then my sister, then my mother. None of them typed anything. I kept going. Who bought school clothes for the youngest when he was 15 and you were figuring out the finances? Who paid the electric bill this past March when Mom called me because it was past due? I work in the trades. I know I'm not a doctor or an MBA, but I kept this family from losing the house, and I've been sitting at the back table my whole life for it. Just wanted to name that out loud before we keep talking about where this family is going. I put my phone face down on my couch and stared at the ceiling. My heart was hammering. I had never done anything like that. I was always the one who swallowed it, who made it easier for everyone, who understood. My phone started vibrating almost immediately. My brother called first. I sent it to voicemail. He called again. I sent it again. Then a text. "Dana, this is not the time or place for this. You're making it about you. Today was about celebrating something real." My sister texted next. "I understand you're upset, but you didn't have to do that in the group chat. You embarrassed Mom on a happy day." My mother didn't call. She texted, And the text was 3 sentences. I'm hurt that you chose to air grievances at a time like this. I have always loved you and done my best. I think you owe your brother an apology. I read all of it. Then, I screenshot every single message, the original chat, the photo she posted, every response, and I saved them in a folder I labeled simply, record. That word, apology. She wanted me to apologize to my brother. I turned my phone over and thought for a long time. I did not apologize. What I did instead, over the next several weeks, was get very quiet in a different way than before. Before, my quiet was a kind of surrender. I went silent because making noise felt dangerous. Felt like it would cost me the family I still wanted to believe in. This quiet was different. It had a direction. I muted the family group chat. Not forever, just to stop letting it drip into my days like a slow leak. I stopped volunteering to fix things at my mother's house, the kind of small jobs I had always just done without being asked because I was the one who knew how. The leaky outlet in the garage. The ceiling fan that needed rewiring. I stopped showing up with my tools on Saturday mornings. If she noticed, she didn't say so to me directly. I put that energy somewhere else. My supervisor at the contracting company had been nudging me for months about applying for a project lead position on a commercial job coming up, a renovation of a community center on the north side of town. I'd been hesitant in the vague, unfocused way you're hesitant about things when you're spending too much emotional energy on people who don't deserve it. With the noise gone, I applied. I got it. The job was more complicated than anything I'd led before. I was coordinating a crew of 6, managing supply timelines, signing off on inspections. I came home exhausted in a way that felt earned rather than depleted. There's a difference. And if you've felt both, you know exactly what I mean. My coworker, Priya, who'd been in the trade 3 years longer than me, and was the kind of person who made everything feel steadier just by being in the room, noticed the shift in me one afternoon when we were eating lunch on the tailgate of her truck. "You seem different," she said. I told her about the party, about the back table, about what I'd typed in the group chat. She put her sandwich down. She looked at me with this expression that was not quite surprise and not quite satisfaction, but something in between. She said, "You finally said it." I said, "I don't know if it changed anything." She said, "It wasn't supposed to change them. It was supposed to change you." I kept thinking about that for days afterward. The first sign that something had shifted outside my own head came from my youngest sibling. He texted me on a Wednesday night, out of nowhere, which was not something he usually did. He was 23 by then, finishing his 3rd year of pre-med, living in a campus apartment 4 hours away. He had always been the easiest one in the family, the youngest, the one who hadn't been formed yet when the hardest years happened. He had benefited from everything I'd helped hold together without ever quite understanding the cost of it, because he'd been too young to see it clearly. His text said, "Hey, I've been thinking about what you wrote in the group chat. I want to talk to you about it. Not to argue, just to talk. Is that okay?" I said yes. He called that night. He sounded younger on the phone than I expected, unsure in a way that I didn't often hear from him. He said he'd been thinking about the years after their father died, trying to actually remember what had happened versus what he'd been told happened. He said he remembered that I had been the one who drove him to school some mornings, that I had been the one who showed up when the furnace broke in the middle of winter, that I had been the one who sat with him in the emergency room the night he broke his wrist at a track meet because their mother couldn't get there for 2 hours. I didn't remember any of those things as sacrifices, I told him. They were just things that needed to happen. He said, "Yeah, but you were the one who happened them." He was quiet for a moment, and then he said, "I don't think I said thank you back then. I don't think any of us did. And I'm sorry for that, Dana. I mean it." His apology was not complicated or full of conditions. He didn't add anything after it. He just said it and let it sit there. My chest went tight in a way I hadn't expected. I told him it wasn't his job to fix what happened. He'd been 15, but I was glad he'd called. He said, "Mom is upset. She keeps talking about your message like you attacked her." I said, "I know," he said. "But the thing is, she's also upset in a different way than usual. Like, she's upset at herself. She just doesn't know how to be upset at herself without turning it into being upset at you instead. I didn't know what to do with that, so I just filed it away. The community center project finished 2 weeks ahead of schedule. My supervisor wrote a formal commendation that went into my file and forwarded it to the company owner. A week later, I got called into an office and offered a position as a certified field superintendent, the first one under 40 that the company had ever promoted to that role. More responsibility, more pay, my own crew assignments, and a company truck. I sat with the offer for 24 hours before accepting, not because I was uncertain but because I wanted to feel it properly. Sitting in my apartment that evening, the same apartment I'd moved into when I was 22 and newly apprenticed and learning what it meant to be on my own, I noticed something about what I was feeling. It wasn't the urge to call my mother. It wasn't even the thought of her. It was just me, and the weight of a thing I had built myself, and the quiet satisfaction of knowing that nobody had handed it to me. I texted Priya. She sent back 3 fire emojis and called me 11 seconds later, and we stayed on the phone for 2 hours. A few months into the new position, something strange started happening. I had a small Instagram account, nothing strategic, just photos I posted occasionally when a job turned out particularly well, finished panel rooms, neat cable runs behind drywall, before and after, shots of old knob and tube wiring, replaced with modern circuits in century-old houses. I captioned them with technical explanations, mostly because I liked writing out what I'd done. People started following the account, not in viral numbers, but steadily, week by week. Other tradeswomen, young women asking how to get into the field. Men and women who said things like, "I never knew electrical work could look like art." Then I posted something that wasn't about wiring at all. It was a photo of my tool belt laid out on the hood of my company truck. I wrote a caption that started as something else and turned into something honest. I wrote about what it felt like to choose a trade and spend years watching people smile politely when you told them what you did. I wrote about the version of success that doesn't show up in slideshows. I didn't mention my family by name. I didn't describe the party. I just wrote about the feeling of standing in a room full of people who consider your work beneath mentioning and still knowing, in some untouchable part of yourself, that your work holds the room's lights on. The post got shared several thousand times over the following 2 weeks. Most of the comments were from people saying some version of, "I thought I was the only one. I felt this in my entire body." My family still introduces me as just a plumber, like it's a thing to apologize for. One comment was from someone I recognized, a woman from my mother's church who had known our family for years. She wrote, "This is so powerful. Parents need to read this. We do real damage when we rank our children." I saw that comment and understood that it had been seen by other people in my mother's circle. I didn't do anything about that. I just noted it, the way you note weather. My mother called me 4 days after the post started circulating. I hadn't spoken to her directly in almost 3 months. She called from her cell, not a blocked number, and I answered because I had decided I was done making decisions out of avoidance. She skipped any opening. She said, "Dana, I've been seeing something going around that sounds very much like our family. People from church are sending it to me. I don't know what you're hoping to accomplish, but you're making us look like we were cruel to you, and that is not what happened." I said, "I didn't mention anyone by name." She said, "You didn't have to. People who know us know." I said, "Then maybe they know because they saw it too. The back table, I mean." Silence. The kind of silence that has weight in it. Then she said, "You have always been loved. I have never not loved you. But you have a chip on your shoulder about your career choice, and you've decided to take it out on this family publicly, and I find that very hurtful." I waited until she was finished. Then, I said something I had been carrying in some form for 10 years. I said, "I am not embarrassed about my work. I never have been. You are the one who's been embarrassed about it. There's a difference. I know what I did for this family when Dad died. I'm not asking you to put it in a slideshow. I'm just telling you I'm done apologizing for it by sitting quietly in the back of the room." She said, "After everything I've sacrificed for you." I said, "I love you. I genuinely do. But I'm not going to keep managing your comfort at the cost of my own. That's not something I'm able to keep doing." I hung up gently. Not angrily. Just firmly. I sat on the floor of my living room afterward and let myself feel the entire shape of it. The grief and the relief all mixed together, which is exactly how it feels when you finally say a true thing to someone you love. My youngest sibling texted me an hour later. He'd heard about the call from our mother. He wrote, "She's upset, but she's also quiet in a different way than usual. I think you said something that landed. She might not ever say so, but I think it landed." I wrote back, "That's enough for now." The following spring, a local news segment did a short feature on women in the trades in our region. My supervisor recommended me without telling me first, and I found out about it when a reporter called my cell. I agreed to do it, mostly because the question she asked was exactly the question I had been waiting for someone outside my family to ask. She said, "What would you tell a young woman who's being steered away from trade work because it's not considered prestigious?" I said, "I'd tell her that prestige is just a story someone else made up to rank people. The work that keeps a building standing, that keeps the heat on, that makes everything else possible, that work does not need anyone's permission to matter. You decide what counts. Not your family, not a party seating chart. You." It aired on a Tuesday night. My cousin, the dental hygienist who'd sat at the back table with me, texted right after it ended. She wrote, "I watched this 4 times. I'm going to show it to my kids." Priya sent a voice memo of herself, just cheering for 15 seconds straight. My youngest sibling sent a link to the segment with the caption, "This is you, isn't it? You did that." Nothing from my mother directly. Nothing from my brother or sister. But 2 days later, my youngest sibling called and mentioned, carefully, that our mother had watched the segment, that she'd watched it alone, in the living room, and he'd come in partway through without her knowing and seen it playing. He said she hadn't said anything about it afterward. She'd just sat there for a while in the room with the television off. He said he didn't know what that meant. I said, "Maybe it doesn't have to mean anything yet. Maybe she just needed to see it." He said, "She misses you. She doesn't say it that way. She says you're being difficult and that you've always been too sensitive. But underneath that, Dana, I think she misses you." I let that sit for a moment. I said, "I miss who I thought she could be. That's real, but I can't keep showing up and letting her decide where I sit. That's not missing someone. That's just absorbing damage and calling it love." He didn't push back on that. He just said, "I get it. I just wanted you to know she's not untouched by all of this." About 8 months after the news segment, I got a letter in the mail. Real mail, an envelope with a stamp, my mother's handwriting on the outside. I set it on my kitchen counter and looked at it for a full day before opening it. Inside was a card, the kind with a nature photograph on the front. Inside the card she had written in her slightly looping script, across both inner panels. She wrote that she had been doing a lot of thinking. She wrote that she knew the graduation party had not been handled the way it should have been. She wrote that she was proud of my work, which was the first time she had ever written or said those words, and it made my eyes sting in a way I had not expected. Then she wrote that she felt I had chosen to hurt the family publicly, instead of coming to her privately, and that the way I'd used social media and the news segment to make a point had embarrassed her in front of people she had known for years, and that while she understood I had grievances, there were better ways to handle things. She ended with, "I am your mother, and I love you. I would like you back in this family, but it has to be on terms we can both respect." I read it twice. I thought about 10 years of being the child she didn't know how to mention in a room. I thought about the barbecue, and the party, and the photo slideshow with 2 frames I appeared in. I thought about the mortgage and the school clothes and the emergency room at 2 in the morning. I thought about what she meant by terms we can both respect. I had a feeling I knew exactly what she meant. "Come back. Sit in your place. Stop naming things out loud." I got out a piece of paper and I wrote back. Short and plain. I wrote, "I love you too. I want a relationship with you. What I can't do is go back to pretending the last 10 years didn't happen. I'm not angry. I'm not trying to punish you. But I need you to be able to say, at least to me, that the way things were set up wasn't fair to me. I don't need an announcement. I just need you to be able to say it. When you're ready to say it, I'll be here." I mailed it the next morning. I don't know what she did with it. My youngest sibling told me she read it and didn't respond to him about it, which might mean she was thinking about it, or might mean she had put it in a drawer somewhere. I decided I was okay with not knowing for a while. What I knew was this. I had a job I was good at, and a position I had earned. I had a crew that called me by name and came to me when something went wrong because they trusted that I could fix it. I had Priya and the network of other tradeswomen I'd found through the Instagram account that was still slowly, quietly growing. I had my youngest sibling, who had turned out to have more capacity to see clearly than I had given him credit for, and who texted me at irregular intervals to say things like, "Thinking about you, and hope the job is good." I had, for the first time in my adult life, a life that felt like something I had actually chosen. Not a path I had taken by default because I was the one who could be displaced without consequence. A real choice. Made in full. Mine. I still drive past the house I grew up in sometimes, when work takes me to that part of town. I slow down a little without meaning to. The shutters my father installed are still there. There's a light in the kitchen that I rewired when I was 23, and I can see it from the street. A warm yellow square in the evening. I put that light there. Nobody at the front table would know that, but I do. And lately that has been enough. If you were in my position, and someone offered you the choice between a seat at a table where you were never quite real, or a life you built in a room where nobody ranked you, which would you choose? I want to know. Tell me in the comments and tell me where you're watching from, because I have a feeling this story has traveled further than I think. All stories on Revenge Fire are original fictional narratives created for entertainment and reflection. Characters, names, locations, and events are entirely invented. Our goal is to explore themes of self-worth, family dynamics, and personal boundaries in ways that spark meaningful conversation. Thank you for watching.